let's jump into Space Tango. So Space Tango is a really awesome company in town that I want you to describe in the space sector. And so when we got on the phone a few days ago, NASA had commercialized space. First, they did space travel, rockets, right? So SpaceX started building rockets. And then they recently also commercialized the act of like dwellings in space, which was not too long ago too, right? So basically the whole act of going to space now is open to private business. And so how did Space Tango come out of that? And talk about that story.
Yeah, so Chris Kimball, I mentioned as my predecessor at KSTC, great visionary. And so he saw that coming. He saw the commercialization of space coming, getting out of everything being done by the government or governments, right? Not just the U.S. And he formed a subsidiary or a faction within KSTC called Kentucky Space. And there were a lot of jokes about Kentucky Space when it first kind of went public, right? You can imagine, moonshine and bib overalls and those type of things, right? But worked a lot with Morehead State. And Morehead State has the Space Science Center there. You can get a master's in space science at Morehead. And Ben Alfress is the director, and Chris and Ben, formed a great alliance and started with CubeSats and putting CubeSats up, and Kentucky Space was focused on that. And then sort of hired in this intern named Twyman Clements. He was a master's student at UK in mechanical engineering, and he worked part-time at KSTC and got going on some stuff. It sort of figured out that CubeSats wasn't the right path at the time.
You say sats, you mean satellites?
Satellites,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, small satellites.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. All right. CubeSats. For those of you listening, I'm forming this thing that's probably, it's, I don't know, they're maybe 18 inches high, and, imagine a couple of tissue boxes stacked on top of one another. And they're getting even smaller now, but that whole field was starting to get a tad saturated. And so they went a different direction and came up with this concept of putting a lab on the International Space Station. And so they built this thing called the Tango Lab. And imagine a thing that's basically about the size of a microwave. And it's got 3 slots, and on each slot, it's got a 2x4 configuration of tissue-sized box experiments. Now, you only get 7 because it's 4 and 3, and the last section is reserved for electronics. So you can put 21 experiments in this microwave. It's not a microwave, but it's roughly that size. And now, you can bank them, you could do 7, you could technically take up the whole thing for 1 experiment, et cetera, et cetera. And you fly that up, you run the experiment. Space Tango spent a decent amount of money building the interface. You can get data, you can get vision coming back to you so you can see these experiments quasi-real time. I mean, there's some delay. Occasionally NASA's like, nope, none of this commercial data. It's all DoD, military. We can't tell you what it is. And they cut your data, and then it comes back a little while later. But anyway, so for the most part, it's near real time. And so you run experiments up there. What kind of experiments do you do? There's a lot of things that happen in microgravity. So there's a cool one that they're doing with retinal implants. So imagine that you are at risk, or you actually have macular degeneration. You need an implant into your eye, but you need this very uniform coating to this implant. You can't get that uniform coating in gravity. So you go do that coating in microgravity. That's a good example from a couple of perspectives, because it doesn't work on Earth, but the value of that component is very, very high. Right? What will people pay to save their vision?
Yeah.
So in 2016, Space Tango started operating on its own, moved out of the space that it had at KSTC and moved up here. a block from where we're sitting onto Short Street. Started hiring engineers, put the first lab on station in, I think, August of 16. They had a party. It launched at 11:30, and actually didn't launch until after midnight. I was probably the only one in the room at the time that was well past their bedtime. Everybody else there was a lot closer to your all's age than mine, but I stayed up late and saw the launch, and they installed the lab a couple days later. They now have a second lab. They are running pretty much autonomously as an organization. They've moved out off of Winchester Road now. They are up to probably about a dozen engineers. They have a couple people in Houston. They have one person in California. And they'll launch on any commercial flight. Putting experiments up, and the experiments are getting more and more technical. A lot of it is around bioscience, because that's the real thing that's an opportunity, is to do bioscience in zero gravity.